All right, well, welcome everybody inside the Outhaus. My name is Sheree Mullen. I'm one of the Outhaus management team, along with David Maskell, Henry Friend, Pete, who's in the field, and we are so lucky to have Ellen Barker back with us this week to help me co-host. So yay! So without further ado, this week, oh, sorry, before we start, I do want to pass over to Henry Friend to do our welcome to country, if you don't mind.
Thanks, Sheree. So we'd just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia, where we're all based digitally at the moment. And we pay our respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. And acknowledge the role that we all have as educators in the outdoors to ensure that we're bringing awareness to Indigenous issues whilst we're in the field, or as we are at the moment in our houses or virtually.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Henry. So burning question of the week is, how do we keep women in the outdoor industry? Something that's very near and dear to my heart, along with, I'm sure, many of the people in the group. So we'll be discussing some of the issues facing women in the outdoor sector, how this affects their career, and then what we can do to make it an easier choice for them to stay. And then, of course, at the end, we'll do our quote and video of the week and toilet talk. All right. So to get us started, now I can't get my screen to go out. All right, so I just wanted to start this week by setting our intention for this session with a quote that I found by Tonya Gray. Some of you may know her, many of you may. She's probably one of the preliminary and forward-thinking women in Australia that studies and has a lot of articles on this subject about women in the outdoors and some of the struggles that they face. So to set our intention, by shining a spotlight on the inequalities and asymmetries in outdoor education, my desire is to empower women and men to fortify their mutual efforts towards an inclusive future and to eliminate the pockets of bias we experience. I think that one thing I want you guys to think about as we do this session is what can we as women do to change the status quo for other women? What can employers do to help support women in the field? And how can co-leaders and others help support their female counterparts? Like I said, there's lots of articles by Tonya Gray, and here's another really good one that I found. I did a lot of research before this session to kind of set some of the topics that we would talk about. So this was in her article, The Hidden Turmoil, Females Achieving Longevity in the Outdoor Learning Profession by Michelle Wright and Tonya Gray. Being a woman in the outdoor learning profession can bring distinctive challenges and roadblocks. Even more difficult is sustaining a lifelong career, flourishing into a woman's 50s or 60s. Based on this premise, career longevity seems elusive for some women who aspire to work in the outdoors. Additionally, the outdoor industry is associated with technical prowess and physical competence. Gender-based socialization often clouds women's perceptions of success, creating a lonely journey for those who choose to remain. So to start us off with our first kind of topic of issue, where I'm going to pass it over to Ellen Barker, who will continue on.
Thanks, Sheree. So the first topic that we thought we would get started on with today's session is actually looking at education and the integration into the outdoors. And I think one of the first things that I was thinking about throughout the conversations that Sheree and I had in the lead up to this, and when she was speaking just now, was why do we want to have women in the outdoors? Why does it matter? And that's something that I would like people to think about throughout this session, because if we could answer that question about whether, you know, is it important and is it valuable, that might motivate, you know, the change to what we think is most important. And I feel like, you know, if you want something and if you value it greatly enough, you will make it happen. But looking at education and integration into the outdoors, I'm going to refer to an article, The Gendered Hidden Curriculum of Adventure Education. And this is from 2018 by Karen Warren, Denise Mitten, Kira Demore, and Erin Lotz. And it's studying the female outdoor education students in Australia. Sorry, when studying female outdoor education students in Australia, Lugg in 2003 concluded that a hidden content in adventure education was prominent, based on that there were some unspoken rules that allow men in the outdoors to maximise their learning opportunities at the expense of their female counterparts. And so that's a direct quote from that article. And when I think about that, I think about, I guess, often this impression and this belief that men are more adventurous or more capable in the outdoors or more highly skilled, and therefore are more likely to be invited on a trip potentially, or into a more sort of, into different situations in the outdoors, or might be given different opportunities based on an assumption about their abilities or their wants for themselves or their future. And Shree's actually going to share an example that she's experienced to kick us off, and then we'll open up the discussion to see what other experiences people have had in the room.
Thank you, Alan. So the experience I wanted to share with you guys today came from my university experience. It was the first time that I actually started getting into outdoor education as a career. I started getting involved with our outdoor club on campus and found that I really enjoyed it. I had a really great role model of another person who worked at the college who was a woman, and she was taking me out going climbing and stuff like that. And it was just really great. So I started getting as involved as I can. I went to all the trips that I could go to. I went to all the trainings in the hopes that I would become an outdoor leader for the college. Unfortunately, I was never given that opportunity. And it wasn't until later that I found out that the head of that department actually told the mentor that I had that one of the reasons he didn't give me the role was because he decided that he didn't think I was going to go into the outdoor ed field. So there was no point in giving me that leadership role. I tell you that one experience to tell you the opposite. So that was my negative experience. At the same university, I worked for the recreation department. And the head of the recreation department was a really positive influence on me. And he actually really pushed me to become and to get into the outdoors because it was a passion of mine. And he was part of the reason why I got my first job in the outdoors as the adventure programs graduate assistant at James Madison University, where I went on to do my master's degree. So not only did he push me to go into that, he also showed me that I actually didn't have to pay for my master's degree, but through my graduate assistantship. So fortunately for me, I had that positive experience as well during my education and kind of introduction to the outdoor and recreation field, that I was able to be encouraged to continue my journey in outdoor education.
So we're wondering, I guess, is there anyone else out there who's had a similar experience to Cherie, where they may have had someone make an assumption about them and their experience based on their gender, or anyone who has experienced direct commentary, or on the flip side, had an entirely positive experience where, you know, they haven't felt that at all and they felt entirely inclusive and equal in their experience?
Well, I'll make a comment to start things going. Yeah.
Thanks, David.
I come from a military background, yeah, and inclusiveness has always been part of the military. And one of the things we did in my lifetime, of course, was include women into the mainstream of the military and even into all parts of the military now. That was a little bit after my time there, but that moved there. But when I left the army and I started adventuring for myself, all of my personal climbing friends, or most of them, yeah, caving, particularly caving, have always been women, right? And one of the things there is that I find myself more secure when I'm doing a dangerous outdoor activity with ladies, because the blokes look off into the sunset and are thinking about the football or something. And when I might be in trouble, I want somebody that can, is watching what I'm doing and making sure. So I've found that sort of team with myself and some of the ladies in my life. And these aren't ladies I have a relationship with. These are lady friends, has been a much more positive experience than adventuring with many blokes. So, and I also bring that into my business. I have no difference between ladies and, all those things don't matter as far as I'm concerned. We've even got one of my old warrant officers, a tough old man in his day, who actually is now a girl, gone through all the operations, came round to my place yesterday. So, I have no worries about lots of things in the modern world. But I don't see any difference personally. I think it's only in people's minds. That's in my opinion.
Oh, that's awesome, David. Thanks for sharing that.
Does anyone else have any similar positive experiences where they feel like their role models have been distinctly of sort of male or female?
Ellen, I think from my perspective, I have limited experience in the outdoors, so I can't talk to this sector. I'm very new to this sector, but it's not dissimilar to other sectors in its gender inequality. And throughout my career in hospitality, local government, I was continually thrown against the fire with certain challenges. But I feel that it's how you react and how you develop yourself and how you can cope with those circumstances. I'll allude to my very first experience, which I think was probably one of those moments in time where I don't know how, but I had to swim instead of sink. And I use it a lot when I'm coaching my mentorees, but I was a very, very young assistant hotel manager, and I was on front desk one night helping the night manager, and I had a guy who was complaining about everything. He was one of those people that everything went wrong in the whole facility, and he came up to the front desk and he was literally yelling at me and saying, "I want to see the manager now, this is ridiculous." And I just said, "Well, sir, I am the manager, how can I help you?" And he said, no, I want to see the manager. And he kept saying that, and it was about 3 or 4 times. I said, "No problem, I'll go get him." So I went out the back and I grabbed the night manager who was trying to get some work done, and I just said, "You're the manager, get out there and pretend you are my manager and hear this guy out. I just need to hear his issues, which I know when I heard them, I could solve them." But he wasn't going to talk to me. So I had to circumnavigate that by presenting him with something that he would talk to. And the night manager thought I was absolutely bonkers, but he went out and he said, "Certainly, sir, how can I help you? I'm terribly sorry. I'm the manager. What can I do for you?" And this guy just went blah with all the information that he'd experienced that day. And I thought it was just a general perception that this guy had, that obviously, one, I was young. So going to, I think there was a comment earlier, is this relevant to age? Absolutely. And I also was female. But I think the way that I had to react to that to get the argument solved was probably not the preferred way, but it was certainly one way you get through a circumstance like that. And I think, as I say, it's the way you react to it. I didn't go and say, "You chauvinistic pig," but I got the issue done and navigated its way through it. So I think you actually get through certain circumstances differently. And that was my first negative experience. I've had lots of positive ones, and I feel that as women, we've just got to prove our worth as everyone else does. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Thanks, Laurie. Just out of interest, did you raise the fact during the discussion later that you were actually the manager on duty?
Yep, I told him that straight up. So when he wanted to see the manager, I said, "I'm the manager on duty. How can I help you?"
But by the end of that interaction, did he accept that at any point in time?
No, No, he wasn't going to. I think the important thing for me at that time was to try to solve his problem so that it wasn't the organisation's reputation that damaged, and we actually fixed his problem so he'd be a returning customer. That's all I had to focus on.
Which is really fascinating, and I think it certainly indicates an attitude to problem solving, which is just solve the problem and not necessarily address the issue that's at the heart of the problem. And we do so often aim to do that in the short term. And where does that leave, I guess, that particular person in the long term? Probably with that exact same attitude that, you know, this person in this demographic cannot be in that position.
Absolutely. And I mean, this was, geez, I'm going to show my age here, but this was, you know, late 80s, early 90s. So, you know, the mentality back then compared to today is very, very different. But I think, as I say, my point is more about how we react to circumstances and how we deal with it, as opposed to trying to fix the occurrence. It's just, you know, for our own mental health and our own mental stimulus, is trying to solve the problem and keep going.
No, and I think that's quite common. I must admit, in my experience, I have had like many men teach me my craft over the years, and I have learnt probably from more males than I have from women. But then I've also had a wonderful set of female peers that I was lucky enough to develop with. And I think without those female peers that I happened to connect with at the right time in my career, I probably would not have persisted with outdoor education. So it's an interesting mix. But all of the majority of my bosses were male, and at no point in time, and the majority of the trainers that I've had in my time have been male, but at no point in time have I ever felt like they have had any doubts about my ability in relation to my gender. But I have run facilitation sessions for, I guess, that wonderful age group of middle-aged men, and they have not taken me seriously, because how can a 21-year-old female possibly teach them about teamwork and how to work together well? Once again, that combination of age and gender making the situation more complex. And I can think of a scenario of a friend of mine who was telling me that she was lead guide on a whitewater trip, once again with a small group of males, and she actually had an assistant male who was essentially the same age as them. And at the end, despite the fact that she led the trip the entire time and was, you know, the highest skilled instructor, at the end of the trip they walked over to him and said, "Oh, thank you very, very much, such and such, you've been a wonderful group leader." And he just turned around and said, "Actually, you've just thanked the wrong person. You know, this person over here is the group leader." And that's a wonderful example of, you know, an ally who's immediately recognized and redirected, I guess, that sort of misconception that, you know, has just happened in that situation. Right.
Could I just jump in and say the conversation's fascinating, and I really want to highlight and welcome a couple of new people to the Outhaus today who I've got a long history with, Claire Dallett from OEG, and I've got a lovely story. It'll be only quick. I remember Claire when she was just a little group leader coming over from an American Y camp, and you know, she knew a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and she's gone and progressed her career and her educational background, even though I had big arguments with her about fighting over printing out her master's degree on the computers that I was managing at the time at OEG and all that type of stuff. But I think Claire's probably got something to add to today's discussion, because she's seen a lot of staff in her time progress through OEG as possibly the biggest provider of outdoor ed in the country, I'd say, and a lot of very strong female characters who I've had the pleasure to work with and work for over the years. So, Claire, do you have anything to add to the conversation?
Thanks, David. Good on you for chucking me in there.
Always.
It's lovely to be here, and it's great to see so many familiar faces as well. It's Ellen, you said it, like the one of the words that really stuck out for me was ally. And I suppose a couple of maybe personal stories that might add to this. I actually remember my first day at OEG way back. And I remember my boss at the time, a woman called Sue Natoli, who some of you will know. And Sue was one of the early folks at OAG. Dave and Sue actually used to share a house. And I remember Sue showing me, I remember sitting down with her and she was telling me what my job was. And she took the organizational chart at the time and she said, she turned it upside down. So very opposite to what you would typically see an organizational chart. So you'd see the CEO at the top and the executives and the mid-management and all the rest. And then you see the field staff typically along the bottom. And I can remember really clearly, Sue flipped it on its end and she said, we work for them. And we work for the enabling them to provide the opportunities for young people who attend our programs. And it really stuck with me about this really strong female who very clearly and unabashedly, I suppose, was very clear with me about what my job was and the fact that I'd never had interestingly, I'd never had a female boss up until that point when I worked in the US and in Europe. And it always stuck with me. And then interestingly, that story sort of transposed that. I've been very lucky in my time to work with and for some very strong women and who've taught me an awful lot and really helped pave the way for me in a career in many ways for risk management, which at the time when I got to OEG, there was 2 risk managers in the world, 2 risk manager positions, and they were held by 60-plus-year-old men in the US. So Knowles and Outward Bound employed full-time risk managers. So it was a very new thing back then, almost 20 years ago. And interestingly, fast forward almost 20 years ago, and about 6 months ago, I had an interaction with a colleague that has got me thinking a lot, probably 12 months ago now. And I can remember we were getting ready for moving into a new office in Melbourne, and we were walking around. The place had all been gutted. It was getting fixed up, all the different offices and the different areas were getting set up. And I remember walking around with a number of colleagues, and this colleague of mine said, just for context, at the time, we didn't have a receptionist. We were about to recruit one. And I'm walking around, and I was the only woman in the group at the time. There was about 8 of us standing there. And my colleague said, he said, yeah, this is this office, and this is the CEO's office here. And this is our reception. This is where the receptionist, she's going to sit here. And I remember going, hang on, we haven't got a receptionist. And I said, or he. And I could have also said, or they. And I can remember my colleague got really upset at me. And it literally, and I think, Ellen, back to your point, at the time, it almost felt, I brought it up and I said, well, I kind of reject your premise of what you're saying. It could be a male or female, or someone who doesn't identify as either. And he got really shirty with me. And I can remember really clear at the time going, is anybody else here going to speak up? Or why is it that it's my job as a woman to bring up the fact that this is an issue? And interesting, it led to months of issues between us and et cetera, et cetera. We had to work it all out. But yeah, isn't it interesting, separated by 20 years, the experiences. So I don't have the answers, but I guess, yeah, in many ways, I know what it feels like being a woman in a very male-dominated workforce.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Claire. So I heard some good things in there, like Claire mentioned Ellen's comment about allyship. I think is really important in this area, and then also women encouraging other women and kind of being that role model. So we'll move on to the next topic, which kind of leads from this one, and that's the idea of masculine versus feminine qualities and how that kind of plays a part in expectations in outdoor education and recreation. I'll point it again to another quote from The Hidden Turmoil for Females Achieving Longevity. Historically, adventure education, wilderness programs, and outdoor activities have been portrayed as masculine and testosterone driven, involving strength, risk, and unknown outcomes. I guess what I want to ask the group is, how has this idea of masculine and feminine qualities maybe played into your experiences as an outdoor educator?
I can go if you like, Sherry.
Yes.
For me, working a lot with younger kids, I've definitely noticed a lot of the girls, stepping up to the plate and being in the field. I think there definitely is those two energies, and I love how whenever I am on program, being able to work with my colleagues to be able to empower both genders, because I think, as a female, we definitely bring a nurturing spirit, and programs need that, whether it's a boy or if it is a girl, to be able to have that space of being able to care in that sense, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that we can't, be bad cop as well and have fun and do all that type of thing, but I just definitely think that point is important, or at least I've noticed that in the field.
Awesome. Thanks, Tegan.
Sherry, can I just jump in for a second as
Yes,
well?
of course.
As Sharon Mackay, we work with women, all women, but deal with a lot of third-party providers who are men. And I think you can make a lot of generalizations about what women do and what men do. I think, we provide opportunities for women to get in and just take a step outside their comfort zone that maybe they haven't had that opportunity in the past. And I do think that when men are in the situation, it does change the dynamics. And like I said, we work with just predominantly groups of women, but it's interesting to see and to hear the feedback from women coming to us and the people that work with us, how they are liberated a bit more to be able to do what they want to do, to take that next step, to feel more encouraged when it is a group of women. And then they're able to, once they do experience that, they gain a little bit more confidence and feel confident either to continue on and pursue a career in outdoor education, or to actually just adventure with their partners, their husbands, their families. But having those opportunities, I think, probably are a little bit different. And that comes back to even when you're a child, to be able to change those gender stereotypes that this is what little girls do and this is what little boys do. So that's something that we're trying to change, that girls can do just about anything as well.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Sharon.
Can I talk too, Sherry?
Of course.
I think it would be interesting to figure out at what point the gender stereotypes develop in the kids, because I work with a lot of, under fives, and I don't see it at that age. So it would be interested to know when it starts popping up.
Yeah, definitely. Amy works up here in Port Stevens with a nature play company, and she also has a 5-year-old daughter herself. One thing I really admire about Amy's parenting is that she teaches her daughter to be brave. And that's one thing. The video of the week is going to be on how to raise brave girls. It's a TED Talk, and I listened to it earlier, and it's really interesting because I think it is at a younger age that we teach girls to be cautious, whereas males, we kind of encourage them to take risks. And so it's really important that we teach both males and females. And I think it is something that's taught at a younger age, to be careful rather than to take risks or to take calculated risk. Did anybody else have any other experiences that they've had with kind of those masculine and feminine qualities?
Yeah, I think something that I've noticed is that when you're working with a lot of single gender schools, quite often they are expecting different things of the young people. A girls' school might have different goals or different outcomes in a lot of cases that they're going for, that are more about teamwork and interaction and having, pushing their comfort zone, but without the same level of expectations that might be put in place for certain boys' schools. And I know that's absolutely not the case with every school, but there, I think, is a bit of a trend that you can see through the years, especially with schools that have certain cultures to them, I suppose. And it's quite challenging as an outdoor education community to challenge those schools on that, because they're based on very embedded trends and cultures within the school community, such that it's not even on their radar in a lot of ways.
Becky, I can absolutely relate to that. I've just moved from a all-girls school to an all-boys school, and it is fascinating. Like, it's been absolutely fascinating, and I've been doing a lot of reflection in previous weeks on what is inherent and what is, sort of behavior development, what behaviors are being given permission by culture and community, and what hasn't. It's been truly fascinating and very interesting to see.
And I think one of the key things is noticing where those schools don't sort of fall prey to those stereotypes. The kids that come out of those schools are every bit as capable. The boys are every bit as capable in the interaction side of things, and the girls are every bit as capable in the really challenging physical side of things, when you see those stereotypes challenged across the years especially.
And what I do also find interesting is when I was looking at the outdoor leader staff here, I would say that they're not overly masculine characters or in their presentation or their leadership. And yet, I guess stereotypes persist, despite the fact that we have strong leadership all over the place, which they like diversity, strong diversity within leadership all over the place. And yet these persistent stereotypes, or these stereotypes persist. It's quite interesting, and it makes me ask why.
Erin, I noticed you unmuted yourself a minute ago. Did you have something you wanted to input?
Yeah, probably a couple of things which I'm definitely noticing. Firstly, Becky, you really interesting discussion there, talking about the values of different schools and how that can influence the culture on programs. And I'm definitely reflecting on a few expeditions which I've done throughout my time, which have had either that kind of really toxic masculinity taught to boys' schools. And that was something that I really didn't appreciate. And it was a difficult one to navigate as a group leader, let alone as a program manager as well. Another thing that I've kind of experienced is just kind of looking at, I guess, the old school values of outdoor aid communities, where it's very kind of militaristic, or that hyper-masculine, I guess the word could be hegemonic when it comes to getting into organisations as well. So, one of my recent discussions has been around breaking down those perceptions that age or gender don't reflect in people's competence to be able to run an activity or to be able to trip lead. And that is a really negative perception to have on people.
I think the whole, it's not just gender, of course. We had the little age chat a second ago, me being 74. Anyone that wants to pick on me, wants to watch their back. But we need to look at all of the changes that are happening in society, and our whole industry can, over the next 2 or 3 decades, because it will take time, can be a leading factor in making the changes that we're talking about now and other changes. When you're talking about a militaristic thing, I noticed a post yesterday of a person called a guardian angel, and it was an American Marine guarding a group of Australian soldiers that were doing training, so that there's no nasties taking them out, and that the guardian angel has to be able to shoot in a couple of seconds, make a decision on a sniper or whatever. And it wasn't a bloke, it was a lady. And we're talking about the Marines in America and a lady. So there are places that were once hyper masculine that are now integrating women and older people and gays and all of the other various things we need to do, people from ethnic minorities, quite successfully. Our industry, we should be able to do it better than everybody, yeah. And I think that's probably where we've got to do it, is maybe set a bit of a system for the future and say, how are we going to achieve the various things we need? And it is going to take nearly a generation.
Thanks, David. And thanks, Erin, as well. I think those are some really good points that we've brought up. So this idea of masculine and feminine qualities are actually important and on our programs. They're important that we encourage these in both males and females. I think, you know, I hate the term masculine and feminine because it associates like, oh, only males can be masculine, only females can be feminine. But I think it goes both ways. And if we want to avoid those issues like toxic masculinity, then we need to encourage men also to express their emotions and make it okay for everyone to express their emotions on programs or within our group, because we know that, you know, it's an important aspect of who we are as people and how to get in touch with ourselves. And as facilitators, that's what we want. We want our students to get in touch with themselves and understand how they're feeling and why they're feeling it so that they can learn from it.
Sorry, can I make a comment about, it's related to outdoor education. It's actually the IRB racing that the surf clubs practice across the country, where in winter they race the basically their rubber ducks, their IRBs, they race them round, pick up pseudo patients. It's fairly physical. It's in winter, so it's fairly cold. And I am the father of 4 daughters, so I'm involved in this, and my daughters have sort of followed me into it, and they're all competitive racers. So they've raced at state and national level. And there's very, very strong encouragement for the girls to be involved. So the teams that we have are, you know, pretty well balanced and quite mixed. They do have separate categories for males and females. What is quite interesting to watch is the girls, including my daughters, participate very well. It's all fair and even, but a lot of the stuff that happens in the background, for example, one is boat and motor maintenance. And predominantly, it's all done by the males. The females, including my daughters, they just have no interest in fiddling with the motors or tuning the motors or repairing holes in the boats. And the males don't have an issue doing it, and the females don't have an issue not doing it. But we've been talking about what is imposed by society and what's imposed by biology. It's just interesting to see how they'll go out and smash through the waves and break limbs and dislocate things and stuff like that. But when it comes to fiddling with the motors or even fixing them, because the motors, when the boats flip over in the water, you have to take the motor apart and basically flush out the pistons within 6 minutes. Otherwise, it's going to lock up because of the salt water in there. Once again, it's completely male, and I'm not suggesting it's an issue. It's just an observation.
Yeah, no,
my point of view.
I actually think that's a really good point, Trevor, that you're making, and that's kind of the other thing that we were talking about, how the importance of our cultural education of girls at a very young age of what is male and what is female roles. And so the importance that we're teaching, females at a young age that, no, you can do the motors as well, and you can clean them and learn how to do that. You can learn to change a tire, you can learn to mow the lawn. So making sure that I can't think of the word for it right now, but that cultural upbringing of what is male and female roles, and expecting, women, young girls to be brave, and expecting them to learn all these same things that the males are learning. So that's a really good point you made there.
Except maybe not going out and trying to win all the Darwin's Awards.
Yeah.
So in that, I'd like to segue into leadership and recognition. And Claire Dallett touched on this beautifully in the chat earlier when she said, you cannot be what you cannot see. So how do we go about creating good culture? And I would say we look to our representatives, we look to our leadership, we look to those that are speaking up. And unfortunately, we often look to those that are loud. And if you look at an article, which is, once again, it's another Tonya Gray article because she has done amazing work in Australia on, I guess, women in the outdoors. She posted an article in 2018 called "Women Are Still Invisible in Outdoor Education." So Gray says that while the proportion of women in the outdoor education has expanded enormously in the past 3 decades, they are still underrepresented in terms of leadership, acknowledgement, and career. Women seem covered by an invisibility cloak. Within academia and on the front line outdoor education practice, gender asymmetry is evident. She cites that the low proportion of women presenting keynote speeches at outdoor education conferences, female thinkers absent from curricula, lower academic profiles, and women practitioners low visibility in popular culture. I don't know if you've ever looked at the Wikipedia site for key figures in outdoor education, but it used to have 0 females listed on the Wikipedia page as key figures. It now has 1 female, and that is Juliette Gordon-Low, who is the founder of Girl Scouts. So it's absolutely fascinating. And I mentioned earlier, I think for every major role I've had in the outdoors, my line manager or line leader has been a male. I have had very few females to look up to. And when I was head of department, I was the only female in my city who had a purely outdoor ed department. There were some females who led a phys ed department which had outdoor components within it. So, which is a lonely place to be. So I guess, what have other people's experiences been with female role models in the outdoor field? And David Chitty did speak already to having wonderful climbing partners to learn from and learn with. And have, has a lack of leadership roles or female representation within the outdoors affected how you see your career and your opportunities within the outdoor sector? Does anyone have any experiences they'd like to share?
I'd like to introduce a lady, Evelyn Fletcher, that's just joined us. She runs a business called Get a Grip of the Grind, which is about women in industry and business, asserting themselves and lots of things. And I provide activities for her. Maybe Evelyn might be able to speak on what you're talking about there. I'll dob you in, Evelyn. Yeah.
That's all right. Hi, everybody. I'm Evelyn Fletcher. I've been personally active in the outdoor for most of my life, but more recently started using outdoor adventure activities to support women rebuilding their confidence from either career or life challenges that have presented them. And I know when you talk about role models, plus there's a whole lot of other context there for me around I think there's rampant unconscious bias in education, full stop. As a parent, my kids go to a boys' school that has become co-ed 10 years ago, and I can still see unconscious bias in that, even in the curriculum and even in some of the images they share kids when they're trying to get them to do activities. My daughter got denied an opportunity to go to Nepal because they had 14 boys and only 3 girls. They wouldn't mix the group. So the girls didn't get to go. And the unconscious message to my daughter was that she wasn't fit enough and wasn't capable enough to do the trip as a hike. And that's how she's picking this up. So I think back to some of those earlier questions, I don't think the view that you're experiencing is just related to outdoor ed. To me, it's related to education full stop. It's interesting that you talk about that 5-year issue, 5-year-olds, because my kids were coming back out of the school at around 8, 9 and 10 and feeling discriminated against in the playground by the boys who wouldn't pass the soccer ball to them. And it's coming through from parenting as well and social issues. So there's a lot of unconscious bias, I would say. For me, in terms of role models, when I started working with David, the challenge for him was to find women who could lead all the adventure activities, which I think set quite a large challenge for David. To be fair to David, he did then source and look at role models, but there's not that many around. And when I run our festival at the end of February each year, the response from a lot of the women that turn up, who are generally professionals, is that it's actually awesome for 40, 50-year-old women to see 21-year-olds in charge of an abseiling activity, or in charge of the caving that we do, or the hikes. And equally to see, we have one lady who's about the same age as David that leads them on hikes. And it is back to that old adage, you can't be what you can't see. So if they're not seeing and witnessing women out there leading, it's really difficult for other women to come in, and then they lack that confidence to step up and be heard in that space.
Thanks, Evelyn. Have we got any other experiences that might differ from Evelyn's or reinforce Evelyn's?
I've mentioned you to Ellen before about I was actually really lucky in my experiences with female leaders and female role models when I started doing outdoor recreation at my university. I was very lucky to have a strong female role model to kind of give me and show me the way, and show me that, you know, no matter at what age you are, that you can still do outdoor education and outdoor recreation. And also when I used to work for the US military, doing outdoor recreation for the soldiers. So David, I can understand a lot of the stuff that goes on with the military and kind of the mentality there, but I was very lucky to have that my boss there was also a female, which was really great to see a very strong female in a military setting and being that influence to me. So I had some positive female role models. And on the other side of that, I know that when I first came to Australia and started working as a casual leader, one thing I noticed is that I was probably the oldest female within the casual staff by probably about 5 years. So that was very interesting to me to be kind of one of the older people within that sector, and kind of made me look around and realize that, you know, there's a certain age when women start to drop off of outdoor education.
I was actually just reflecting on the fact that while I haven't had many female line leaders, it was actually like I've had a wonderful, wonderful male line leader who has never made me feel anything, you know, less than incredibly valued. And he supported me amazingly through all of my professional development, and is, you know, a key element in sort of me being the educator that I am today. So I've had wonderful experiences from someone who was very conscious and very aware of, I guess, bias and other issues, and being an ally.
Ellen, on that, I think it circles back to what you started with, where you said we need to have all need to consider the why we want more women to stay or to get into the outdoors. Like, one of the best things that's happened in recent times is Laurie getting, you know, jumping on the ACA board as well, and also Pam from ACA, who's the president of ACA, because the ACA has been all blokes on the board, which has just been ridiculous. because it's not representative, and we don't have that balance that we actually need to represent the entire industry. And it's been really good to have that. But I think sometimes we've got to go, righto, we need balance, and maybe we have to stick our finger on the scales to actually get the balance and, you know, get out there. And it's up to all of us, not just up to the hardworking women out there to try to make the change. It's up to all of us to do the right thing for everyone right across the sector. So my take on that is, yeah, we all need that. And sometimes some of us middle-aged white men need a bit of an uppercut every now and again to remind us that we need to do it. So, which we shouldn't, you guys shouldn't have to do that. We should be giving ourselves an uppercut every now and again, I think. So it's why we need to have sessions like this one today, I reckon.
Awesome.
Thanks, Dom. And I really appreciate, because you actually shared what I was thinking about, and I've had a number of these conversations. I've been in a number of these sessions over the years, and Sheree and I were discussing this, and we were sort of saying, what is it that we actually want to get out of these things? And I guess you've just expressed that value of the fact that continuing the conversation and sharing those experiencing and continuing to engage people in this space and not letting it fall off the radar is incredibly valuable in itself, and it means we can continue to work towards finding solutions. To me, I keep asking myself, why is there less women in those representative spaces? Like, what is it about those? And I can speaking personally, I can think of half a dozen reasons why I wouldn't have stepped up onto a board or, you know, other things. And it's quite fascinating to be broken down.
I think one thing that I'm really happy about is the representation of women in this session. We've got quite a few women here and quite a few we haven't seen before, so we appreciate that. And now hopefully everybody can see there are quite a few women out there in the outdoor sector, and this is a very small portion of them. So just so you guys know, we are running a little bit over time. I hope if you guys need to leave, please feel free to, but I hope you'll continue the discussion with us. We only have one more topic that we really wanted to get to, because I think it plays a big part in women's role in the outdoors, and maybe why I don't necessarily see as many women at my age, which is 32, by the way, in the field of outdoor education. And that has to do with motherhood and and families, and kind of the challenge that then becomes those at a certain age, that challenge of balancing those two things. And I think the family part is really pertinent to the males as well, because males have families, and it's a challenge for them too to balance that. So I'll point to another article. It's not by Tanya Gray this time. So this is by Anja Whittington, who did an article on outdoor careers and motherhood. She says, women who are mothers make work and family decisions that often result in sacrifices in one or the other. This might include leaving the workforce, reduced work hours, delaying childbirth, or staying single or marrying late. There are many challenges motherhood poses for women, often requiring women to either leave their chosen career path or change their job responsibilities. Despite these challenges, many women have found ways to manage both family and work life. However, institutional changes could help women to be more successful. So I guess I want us to think about, some of the struggles that we face as mothers and as members of a family, and how that affects us and our ability to do our job. Well, I'll say personally that I did not get into a serious relationship for a long time, because it's not very easy to have a relationship when you're doing a lot of seasonal work and changing countries. And then now that I do have a significant other, the idea of having children has been put off as well for quite some time, just for the fact that it would mean a lot to my career if I had to then put that on hold. COVID aside, of course. So I've heard some really good solutions in this space though. So does anybody have any experiences with this and how it affected them, and maybe some things maybe their employers did that actually helped them in this area?
I have something I'd like to put that's more of a solution, not only to that, but to people generally. some years, for some decades, I've been pushing for the outdoors to have a pathways concept where people can come in, stay, learn things, move out, go and get other jobs, you know, motherhood, whatever, and come back in again, you know, so you can move in and out of our industry. And that would fit not only, the subject we're talking about now, but you know, when people want to go and have a job where they can buy a house and do a few other things, why do we then exclude them from returning to the industry? We need, and you could come up with a lot of good programs. So I think we need to develop a pathways concept for continuous professional development in the industry that allows people to move in and move out.
Awesome. Thank you, David.
Can I just add a little bit to what David was talking about? And there are some people on this, and I'm Jeff Proctor, by the way, if you can't pick up who it is. I came to this industry quite a while ago from a corporate background. So I was a senior executive in Telstra for 30 odd years before I decided to start an outdoor ed or an outdoor training company. When I first started, most of my staff were ex-OEG. Some of them were married, so there were males and females. I learnt probably as much, or if not more, from the females who came and worked for me. And they were far more outskilled than what I was. You've got to remember I was, outdoors was my hobby, but which I tried to make into a business, which a lot of people will tell you is the worst thing to do. Well, we were fortunate that we could employ females and males who were partners. And in our company, I didn't care who turned up. It could be the wife, could be the husband, and they got to choose which programs they wanted to go on. One of the things that the industry and businesses like David's and mine and others, this industry is no different than any other corporate identity. Females have a problem with all of the issues that you've brought up today are also found in the normal corporate world. What's needed is for people to, and I'm talking about senior managers, they need to mentor the people that work with them. So you need to push the talented people. So that is to step back. And I've done a lot of corporate training since I've left the corporate world. And one of the things that I try to teach people is that you can't be the expert in everything. So sometimes to be a really good leader, you have to step back and allow somebody else to lead. And that's what I'm saying about our industry here. The people in charge of the industry need to foster the opportunity for other people to step up. So if I'm the CEO of a company, it is only a title. It's not a function that has to be done by me. It can be done by anyone. So my advice is that to change that culture, it's going to have to come from the leadership areas. And I can look around and see the people on here that I've worked with and known for many, many years. And Claire's a prime example. You know, I can remember Claire when OEG first started in Eildon. And there's a lady who's probably recognised now as one of the top risk managers, certainly in Australia. And that wouldn't have happened unless somebody gave Claire the opportunity to take up that role in whether it would have been, Claire would have got there whether it was in the risk management or in other leadership. So taking away from here today, I would be saying is the things that we really need to do is get a mentoring system in place. And David's right, like people should be able to go out of the industry and come back in as it fits the need. And that goes for males as well as females. I'm lucky to have a son and daughter-in-law who are both radiographers. And their boss is exactly the same as what I was. they don't care who turns up as long as one of either, Tim or Claire turn up and go to work. And that's as it should be. Just a few thoughts.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Jeff. I think you brought up a really good point there that, we need to look towards the companies and the people in charge to kind of make and foster some of these changes that need to happen. I'll share, I had a friend tell me about going on programs, and what she was able to do was her husband was really supportive. And so she was able to get her husband to when she was breastfeeding her children, because it's a very pertinent time in a child's life. And that's one thing that makes it really difficult, I think, for women to go out on programs, is not only when they're pregnant, but shortly afterwards. And one thing that she had the support of her husband, and that he would bring the child to her so that she could breastfeed. And she also had an employer that recognized her right and her, the importance of that happening, and allowing her to have that space to feed her child while she was on program. It may be difficult in expedition-based stuff, but definitely when it's in a camp-based setting, there's obviously a lot of opportunity for that. Would anybody else like to share any solutions or ideas that they would have that could kind of foster a more inclusive environment for women with children or men with children?
Yeah, I've come into the industry actually in my late 30s after I've had my children. And I'd love to see more mothers in the industry. I think people just kind of don't see that we've got that much fun and adventure in us to offer the outdoor industry, but I think we really do. We've got life experience, we've dealt with children. And particularly I've done lots of overseas expeditions, and when I've turned up to meet the parents before I've taken their children, they're like, oh, thank God you're a mother, where I've gone for work with different companies and they haven't wanted me because I'm not 22 and young and cool and hip. But when your child's vomiting in the middle of the night, who you want there is, someone who has got that experience and is going to look after your child as if they are your own, kind of thing. But I've met very, very few mothers in Southeast Queensland, which is really surprising. It's just all really younger women, which I love working with. I don't want to work with all mothers all the time. I don't want to be hanging around with middle-aged white women. That's why I'm in this industry. But, I would really love, I don't know, how do we encourage more women to come into this? Because it's a really fun thing to do, I just don't understand why there's not more of us in there.
Thank you, Fleur.
I do want to jump in here. I think it comes down to flexible work arrangements from employers, firstly. That being, I think, the major problem to being able to get people back into to stay in the industry. Another thing that I was thinking about is also recognition of current competency. So within our industry, we kind of look at the logbook of the previous 3 years. And is it possible for us to look beyond those 3 years to look at the overall competency of a person to be able to get them back in the field as well? I'd be interested to hear from you, Claire, about that idea.
Those are some really great points that you made there. So yeah, the idea of flexible work arrangements. I think Erin was trying to call out Claire. I'm not sure if she's still in the room. I think she's actually, she's not in the room anymore. But if anybody else has any comments geared towards that, I don't know if any of you work in that type of field, but.
Can I just add something? It's I find our industry to be ridiculous in the fact that you have a qualification that runs out, let's say it's 3 years because you go back. I'm a qualified technician. Now that happened over 50 years ago, but I can walk back into the industry and go to work tomorrow because of my qualification. I haven't worked in the industry for 30 years, but I'm still qualified. So why is it that our industry thinks that it's something that you have to do every day in order to be qualified?
I think this reflects in how insurers see our industry, B, potentially how it's reflected within the Australian Venture Activity Standards, and C, I think this is a research question moving into the future to look at how we can maintain accreditation for people that come and go from the industry.
Well, one of the solutions for someone that might not be able to work on week programs or the like, for instance, might be to keep some of their particular outdoor skills by working in scouting, in part-time. If they have children, they can get involved, or even just doing an odd half-day leading for tourism companies, where you've got those shorter duration things, at least some of their hard skills, and that's possibly what we're talking about here. Soft skills, of course, if someone's leaving to do mothering and lots of other things, they're actually developing far better soft skills than most of the rest of us that are still just hanging off cliffs and banging pitons in. So, and soft skills really are what the outdoor industry should all be about. It's how we encourage people to change their lives, to go and become better people, to look after the environment and stuff. So I think we can come up with ways of ensuring people can retain enough hard skill competency.
Those are really great points, guys. In interest of time, we're gonna get ready to stop the recording here in a minute, and I just wanted to make sure that we kind of summed up some of the stuff that we went over today, guys. This has been a really great session, and the fact that we've kept your interest this long means a lot. And I just kind of wanted to reiterate some of the points that we went over today. One is that the importance of having allies and for them to recognize with each other, like when discrimination is happening, and to call it out, whether you're male or female, doesn't matter. Women, encouraging women and setting expectations in those leadership roles, and encouraging other women to go for leadership roles as well, I think is really important. We talk about, earlier there was a comment about the imposter syndrome, and how women often won't go for something unless they feel like they've got 100% of it, rather than a lot of, they say a lot of males will go for it when they only have maybe 50% of the expectations. So just making sure that we're encouraging women to go for those leadership roles. Looking at masculine and feminine qualities, making sure that we're encouraging that in both males and females as a positive, and kind of to avoid this toxic masculinity or this idea that women are only feminine. Also thinking about how we upbring women when they're younger, and teaching them young that they can do everything that the boys can do, and they should do the things that, they should learn how to build a motor or whatever it is. Making sure that we educate people about the importance of outdoor education, and mention the women who've gone before, that there are some very strong women who've made impact in the sector, and making sure that we're telling people about those women too, not just Lord Baden-Powell, but his wife was actually really pertinent in the Girl Guide movement. So making sure that we mention things like that. Once again, guys, thank you so much for joining today. Please feel free to stay and continue to chat. We're going to end the recording here. This has probably been one of our longest recorded sessions, which is really great and says a lot about the topic. Next week,